These are real images you're seeing, images provided by the British Navy. The United Kingdom has opened a new front in the pressure campaign against Moscow, after British military forces entered, took over, and seized control of the Smertus oil tanker, which has been identified as part of the shadow fleet used by Russia to circumvent sanctions and keep money flowing into the war chest. The operation took place in the English Channel in the early hours of June 14, 2026 and arrives this Monday, June 15, 2026 as a tough message. The oil that fuels Vladimir Putin no longer passes as freely before the eyes of the West. With helicopters, Royal Marines commandos, National Crime Agency agents, warships and air support, the United Kingdom carried out the first action, led by London, against a sanctioned oil tanker of this kind since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. The ship was carrying more than 100,000 tons of Russian crude oil, was sailing under the flag of Cameroon, and was boarded in an operation that lasted about 6 hours. For Moscow, it was a blow to the wallet. For Kyiv, it was a political and economic victory. For the rest of Europe, it was a warning that the war also takes place at sea, through oil tankers, fake documents, swapped flags, and the routes used to hide money. What was behind this oil tanker? Why did London decide to act now? How does this seizure increase the pressure on Putin? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. The British government confirmed that the Smertus was boarded by Royal Marines commandos and specially trained agents from the National Crime Agency. The operation was supported by Chinook, Merlin, MQ-4 and Wildcat helicopters, as well as a P-8 aircraft from the Royal Air Force and the ships HMS Sutherland and HMS Ledbury. It was not a simple routine inspection. It was an operation planned with military force, intelligence, and the enforcement of sanctions against a structure that, according to London, helps sustain the Russian war machine in Ukraine. The ship was kept under control after being boarded and taken to an anchorage area on the south coast of England, where it began to be monitored for environmental risk and security issues. The crew, made up of 25 people of various nationalities, did not offer any resistance, according to reports released by the British press. This also shows the operation was carried out with complete control of the situation. The British arrived, boarded, took control of the vessel, and paved the way for an investigation into the cargo, documents, route, and connection with the Russian oil scheme. The main explanation lies in the money. Russia uses the so-called shadow fleet to transport oil even under international sanctions. This network mixes old ships, questionable insurance, flags of convenience, companies spread across different jurisdictions, and routes designed to make inspections difficult. The goal is simple: sell oil, get money, and keep funding the war against Ukraine. Starmer said that the operation was another blow against Russia and against those who helped finance the war in Ukraine. London wanted to show that it is not just announcing sanctions on paper, but actually deploying military forces to enforce the rules at sea. The defense minister, Dan Jarvis, also emphasized that Russia relies on this shadow fleet to fund the conflict. By praising the skill and courage of those involved, Jarvis framed the operation as part of a direct effort to put pressure on Russia's war chest. This makes the oil tanker seizure even more significant. The target wasn't just the ship. The target was the system that allows Moscow to keep selling oil, even after successive rounds of sanctions. The operation took place in international waters, according to the British government, and was presented as an action compatible with national and international law. This detail matters because Moscow usually calls initiatives like this a provocation. London tried to close this loophole from the beginning, stating that there was a legal basis for the operation and that authorization for this type of action had already been given in March. In other words, the United Kingdom had been preparing the ground to move from talk to action. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the United Kingdom for detaining the oil tanker and called on Europe to go even further. For Kiev, simply detaining ships is not enough. Ukraine wants the cargoes to be confiscated, for the oil to stop generating revenue for Moscow, and for the Russian maritime network to lose predictability. Zelensky understands that every barrel stopped means less money for missiles, drones, ammunition, fuel, and logistics against Ukrainian cities. The Russian response came in a threatening tone. Russian Senator Dmitry Rogozin suggested that Russian oil tankers could be prepared with traps in case they are seized in the future. The statement shows the level of irritation in Moscow. When it comes to the shadow fleet, the Kremlin knows the problem is both financial and strategic. Oil is one of the foundations that support Russia's resistance to sanctions. If this route starts to be blocked by military force, the cost of the war goes up. The British press also highlighted that other ships linked to the Shadow Fleet changed course after the operation in the English Channel. The seizure of the Myrtos didn't just affect the boarded vessel, it changed the behavior of other operators, who started to avoid areas under greater surveillance. That's how an operation becomes a message. One ship seized, several ships retreating, and Moscow realizing that the sea has become less safe for its scheme. The case also exposes the weakness of the Russian strategy of hiding oil under flimsy flags. The Myrtos was sailing under the flag of Cameroon, but reports indicate that it may have been removed from the Cameroonian registry, which would leave the vessel even more vulnerable. This is one of the hallmarks of the Shadow Fleet: changing flags, altering routes, using non-transparent companies, and trying to confuse authorities. But when enforcement comes in strongly, the legal appearance starts to fall apart. The seizure of the oil tanker came at the same time that Ukraine intensified attacks against industrial structures inside Russia. In the early hours of June 14, Ukrainian drones hit facilities such as the Azot chemical plant in Novomoskovsk in the Tula region. And attacks against depots and fuel structures in Russian areas were also reported. The logic is similar to the British action at sea. When drones hit this type of facility, Ukraine tries to disrupt Russia's industrial routine from within. It's not just a symbolic attack. It's an attempt to cut off raw materials, generate costs, delay production, and force Moscow to spend more to protect its own territory. In Rybinsk, in the Yaroslavl region, there were also reports of attacks against fuel-related infrastructure. This city is about 700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, which reveals another problem for Moscow. The war is no longer limited to the front line. Ukraine has been showing the ability to reach deep facilities, especially those related to oil, railways, depots, and industrial production. The United Kingdom also puts itself in a leadership position ahead of other European nations. The operation was carried out in coordination with France and reinforces a trend of tougher action against ships suspected of helping Moscow. Previously, many Western responses were limited to statements, sanction packages, and speeches. Now, the image of commandos descending on a Russian oil tanker in the English Channel creates a different kind of impact. The message is a brutal visual blow to Russian propaganda. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.